It's time for our Week 3 college football Saturday selections. A week ago, we went 8-4 against the spread, 10-2 straight up, and thanks to Buffalo's late drive against Temple, we nailed our upset pick of the week. Moving into Week 3, as always, we'll kick things off with our upset pick of the week. How about Pittsburgh, a 3.5-point home underdog against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets in a 12:30 Eastern kickoff. Georgia Tech dealing with the loss of their running back for the season and their quarterback Marshall kind of banged up, nursing some injuries. Even if he plays, how effective will he be? I know Pittsburgh lost by a big margin against Penn State last week, but they weren't out of that game really before Penn State went on a late drive to end the first half. It fell apart after that, but Pittsburgh I don't think is as bad as that score indicates. I like Pittsburgh at home to upset Georgia Tech, a win for the Pitt Panthers, and our upset pick of the week. And now, moving on to our main picks of the weekend, we kick things off at noon Eastern on ABC. An interesting game. Oklahoma is an 18.5-point favorite as they travel to Ames, Iowa to take on the Iowa State Cyclones in a revenge game of sorts. Iowa State didn't look great offensively last week, and now they're dealing with the question of will their quarterback Kyle Kempt even play this week due to injury. I know they still have David Montgomery, a star at running back, but I just don't know if they can keep up with Oklahoma. The Sooners offense, even with the loss of Rodney Anderson for the season, Oklahoma still has a lot of explosive playmakers. Kyler Murray, Hollywood Brown, CeeDee Lamb. Oklahoma, I like them to get revenge. They blow out Iowa State. Oklahoma 38-13. The Sooners win big in Ames. Another noon Eastern kickoff, this one on ESPN. How about Florida State going to Syracuse in the Carrier Dome? The Seminoles a 3-point road favorite. This is an interesting game because on paper, Florida State should easily beat Syracuse. But so far this season, Florida State has shown no indication they have fixed their offensive line issue that they've had for the last couple of years now. And Florida State's secondary, which many thought would be a strength for this team, has struggled. They rank 122nd defending the pass. That's going to be an issue, having to defend Eric Dungey and a Dino Babers offense. I think Syracuse finds a way to pull the upset. How about the Orange? 31-27. Syracuse over the Noles in an early kickoff. Moving ahead now, a 2:30 Eastern kickoff from South Bend, Indiana. Vanderbilt travels on the road to take on the Irish of Notre Dame. This is an interesting matchup to me. Yes, I'm still not sold on Brandon Wimbush, but if there was any other top 15 team playing at home against Vanderbilt, I think they would be favored to win by more than 2 touchdowns. Just because I think they'd overwhelm Vandy at the point of attack on the offensive line and the defensive line. I think that's what Notre Dame's going to do. I think Notre Dame is strong along the offensive line, really good along their defensive front as well. I don't think Vanderbilt can attack the ball well. I like Notre Dame to dominate this game at the line of scrimmage, and as a result, I like Notre Dame 27-10 over the Vandy Commodores. Moving on to a 3:30 Eastern kickoff on ABC. BYU travels to Madison, Wisconsin, where the Badgers are a 22.5-point home favorite. A year ago, I correctly picked Wisconsin to cover against BYU. Why? Because I didn't know if BYU could slow down Wisconsin's running game, and I didn't think BYU could run the football effectively against an elite Wisconsin defensive front. What has changed this year? Not much. I think Wisconsin's going to limit a BYU running attack that has been underwhelming this season considering they played a porous Arizona run defense and looked rather ordinary in that game. And BYU's rushing defense ranks 82nd, having to go up against Jonathan Taylor, a Heisman candidate, and a Wisconsin attack that ranks 5th running the football. I like Wisconsin once again to win big over BYU. Wisconsin 41-13 as the Badgers roll into a showdown at Kinnick next weekend. 3:30 Eastern kickoff. An interesting matchup that seems to be flying under the radar between 2 top 25 teams. This one will be on ESPN. Boise State traveling to Stillwater to take on the Cowboys in a virtual pick'em game. Boise State to me is the more proven team in this matchup. They rolled past Oregon in the Las Vegas Bowl and absolutely crushed Troy in their opener. Boise State returned a lot of defensive starters. They have an experienced quarterback who seems to be getting better in Brett Rypien. Meanwhile, for Oklahoma State, I like the playmakers they have at running back and receiver, but I'm not sold yet on Cornelius at quarterback because he quite simply hasn't played anybody yet. Oklahoma State, maybe I'm underrating them a little bit because I don't know what they are against elite competition. But right now, Boise State's the more proven team. They've produced. They've returned a lot of starters who produced. I like Boise State to go into Stillwater and knock off the Oklahoma State Cowboys. The Broncos, in an upset a little bit for the media, 31-27 again. Boise State with an upset win. Continuing on, a 4:15 Eastern kickoff. How about Houston traveling to take on Texas Tech? The Cougars, a 1.5-point road favorite. This is an interesting game because I really like Houston's balanced offensive attack, and Texas Tech's defense I don't think can really stop them. On the other side, if you look at the numbers, Houston doesn't have a great pass defense. But I think in this game, Ed Oliver and that D-line are going to create pressure and force Texas Tech's quarterbacks to make quick throws. And if Texas Tech starting quarterback Carter isn't back from injury, that's going to put a lot of pressure on a true freshman in Alan Bowman, which against Ed Oliver and company I think is a bad recipe for the Red Raiders. I think Houston wins this game in a close one that's high scoring, but Houston 37-34 nonetheless. Continuing on, Missouri travels to Purdue. Missouri a 5.5-point road favorite for this 7:30 Eastern kickoff on the Big Ten Network. This is an interesting game because a year ago Purdue absolutely walloped Missouri 35-3 in a game played at Mizzou. But this year Purdue seems to have a lot of questions on defense, which was a year ago was their strength. They rank 109th nationally stopping the pass, and against the Missouri offense with Drew Lock and Emmanuel Hall, I don't think that's going to work out well for them. A year ago, Missouri's issues were against teams with really good defenses. I don't think Purdue's there yet. Therefore, I think Missouri wins this football game 34-20. Moving on, another big game at 8 Eastern on Fox. USC travels to Austin to take on the Longhorns. Texas, a 3.5-point home favorite. And neither of these teams to me so far this season has shown they have enough offensively to really warrant the expectations I had and others had for them going into the season. But for USC, I think the issues are more play calling based than talent or execution based. I've long had frustrations with how T. Martin calls the plays for this USC offense. I think when they've had success running the football, that's when they've really been at their best offensively. And he hasn't really committed to running the football and pounding teams, and that's an issue. But in this game, even if USC doesn't commit to running the right type of plays, I like their defense slightly more than I like Texas's. So I think in a game between two bad offenses and two good defenses, I like USC's defense just a little bit more, so I'll give an edge to USC. But this feels like it's going to be a low-scoring, ugly game. USC 16-13. But this game feels like it could go either way. Just a slight lean to the Trojans. Continuing ahead to some Pac-12 After Dark, a 10:30 Eastern kickoff on the CBS Sports Network. Arizona State is a 5-point road favorite as they travel to take on San Diego State. One of San Diego State's biggest advantages in playing other teams is they have a unique 3-3-5 defense. But Arizona State hired former SDSU defensive coordinator Manny Gonzalez this past offseason, so he's familiar with the strengths of the San Diego State defensive players, and Arizona State's going to be familiar with the San Diego State defensive scheme. I think that helps Arizona State. I also think they're helped by the fact that SDSU hasn't been great defending the pass, and Arizona State, with Manny Wilkins throwing to N'Keal Harry, I think is well suited to take advantage of SDSU's defensive weakness. I like Arizona State and Herm Edwards. Yes, Herm Edwards surprising everybody, but I did pick them to get to a bowl game this year. I was higher on them than most, and I'm continuing the ride with the Sun Devils. ASU wins this football game 23-14. Another interesting matchup for Pac-12 After Dark fans. Washington traveling on the road to Salt Lake City to take on the Utes. The Huskies a 5-point road favorite. After watching Washington in week 1 against Auburn, I came away very impressed with Washington. I think they found a couple of good receivers to help take some pressure off of Jake Browning and Myles Gaskin on offense. And although their defense hasn't been great statistically to start this season, I think this is one of the better units in the country. For Utah, yes, they have the number one statistical defense in America, but they haven't played anybody yet. They've played Northern Illinois and an FCS school. And on offense, Utah struggled to score 17 points against Northern Illinois. In fact, one of those touchdowns didn't even come from the offense. Those Utah offensive issues, I'm just not sure they can score enough to win this football game. I know they're a trendy upset pick because it's a home night game in Salt Lake City, and they played Washington close 2 years ago here. But Washington's the better football team. I'm not going to overthink this one. I like the Huskies to win this football game 27-17. Another interesting matchup in Week 3 is Alabama travels to Oxford, Mississippi for a 7 Eastern kickoff on ESPN. The Alabama Crimson Tide, a 23-point road favorite against the Ole Miss Rebels. Ole Miss's defense was awful last weekend against Southern Illinois, which is going to be an issue considering they're going up against an electric Alabama offense led by star quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. But Alabama had to replace a lot of key players in their secondary, and I know Deontay Thompson's a star at safety who's going to be a first-round NFL pick, but outside of him, who's going to cover A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf, Ole Miss's two receivers who are both going to be playing and producing in the NFL for a long time? Add in the fact that Ole Miss has an underrated quarterback in Jordan Ta'amu and returns a veteran offensive line led by star left tackle Greg Little, who's going to be a first-round pick in the NFL as well. Ole Miss has some of the ingredients to really schematically pose a problem to Alabama. They're similar to the teams who've given Alabama trouble in years past. But I just can't get 66-3 out of my head. Alabama just wrecked Ole Miss last year. And really, I mean, Jordan Ta'amu has never played a defense as good as Alabama's, and he's never really had to go up against a coach as good as Nick Saban, who's scheming on that defensive side of the football. So I'm going to go Alabama 41-31 in this game. But this one has the potential to be interesting because Ole Miss fits the profile of the teams who can give Alabama's defense some issues. And if Jordan Ta'amu has the game of his life, all bets are off. But right now, I'm going Alabama 41-31 on Saturday night. Another big Saturday matchup. How about LSU and Auburn in the SEC on CBS at 3:30 Eastern kickoff? Is the Tigers from Auburn are the 10.5-point favorites over the Tigers from Louisiana State. I think Auburn has an advantage in this game because they're a dominant defensive line and they have an opportunistic secondary. I know LSU's defense is good, but I just think the matchup is worse for LSU because quarterback Joe Burrow is still only completing 48% of his passes. And I'm not sold on LSU yet until they get a quarterback who can complete his passes. I mean, what Joe Burrow's been so far this season is basically what LSU had last year at quarterback. So I'm not sold on LSU yet. I think Auburn's defensive line kind of makes them a little uncomfortable. LSU has a terrific defense as well, though. I think this is a physical battle. Going to be a 4-quarter game. I think Jarrett Stidham makes a couple plays late. So I'm going to go Auburn 23-17 at home over LSU. And now we move on to the game of the week. A primetime showdown at 8 Eastern on ABC from Arlington, Texas and Cowboy Stadium as the Ohio State Buckeyes are a 13.5-point road favorite against the TCU Horned Frogs. This is technically a neutral site game in name only. The game in Arlington, just a short drive away from TCU's Fort Worth campus, and you know the stadium will be packed with TCU supporters. And that lends itself into kind of the point of this game. Ohio State's the more talented team, but TCU has a couple of things going for them. First, of course, the game is being played just a short drive from their campus, so you know they're going to have a home crowd advantage. But also, Coach Gary Patterson's been one of the best coaches in America at making in-game adjustments for TCU. Meanwhile, for Ohio State, this is going to be interim coach Ryan Day's biggest test, and only his third matchup, the first real test, actually. So we don't know how he will react. He might pass with flying colors, but we don't know that yet, so he's going to have to prove it on Saturday night. Also, though, for Ohio State, I love their offense. Dwayne Haskins, I pegged early in the season, coming into the season actually, as a potential dark horse Heisman candidate. He has a great arm. He gives them really their best passing threat since Cardale Jones led them to the national championship game. And behind him, he has two really good running backs in Mike Weber and J.K. Dobbins. Add in the fact that this is another terrific off Ohio State defensive front. The secondary is good as well. You know Nick Bosa is going to be able to get to the passer. But also TCU, they have some of the best players as well. You have a balanced offense. Sean Robinson and Darius Anderson, I think, pose an interesting threat running the football. And you know Gary Patterson is going to get the defense ready to play with a star pass rusher in Ben Benogu. I think TCU, even though Ohio State's the more talented team, TCU is not lacking for talent in this football game. They're not going to be outclassed by any stretch of the imagination. So I think Gary Patterson's ability to kind of adjust on the fly in this game is going to help TCU. I'm going to go Ohio State in this game, 34-27. But these are two terrific teams, and I would not be surprised in the least if TCU could pull an outright upset. But for now, I'm going to go Ohio State on Saturday Night Football on ABC. Ohio State over TCU in Week 3.